You worthless piece of crap! I told you not to call me at work unless it's urgent.
Robert's irritated voice shouted through the phone, making me hold my breath for a moment. He was currently away on a business trip. As a busy salesman, he had repeatedly stressed to me how crucial this job was and that I should never disturb him under any circumstances. That's why I wouldn't repeatedly contact him unless it was truly necessary. After calling over and over, his first words when he finally picked up were so harsh. Without even listening, he immediately dismissed it as unimportant, filling me with a rage that made my head feel like it was about to boil over.
It is important. Actually, Melissa is Dash. Shut up! If Mom needs to reach me, she'll contact me directly. The fact that you're the one calling means it's nothing significant. This is ridiculous. I'm hanging up. God, this is why women have such terrible timing.
Robert deliberately cut me off with his loud voice, grumbling complaints as he ended the call. I let out a deep breath I had unconsciously been holding in. Still, my heart was far from calm. Gripping my smartphone tightly, I took deep breath after deep breath, finally managing to compose myself a little.
Does he not know the saying, "Don't speak ill of the dead"?
My name is Jessica. I'm a 32-year-old freelance web designer. In my 20s, I worked my butt off at a company, slowly climbing the ranks until I could finally go independent. Now I work from home while living with my husband Robert. I met Robert through a client I had been working with. We hit it off, dated without any issues, and eventually got married. During our courtship, Robert was a gentle and kind man. But as soon as we tied the knot, his attitude rapidly turned cold. Even when I tried to make time for us to talk, he would just say, "I'm tired," while blankly staring at the TV, ignoring me. On days when he was in a bad mood, he'd make snide remarks like,
"Must be nice for you, lazily working from home. When you go into an office, you have to worry about your boss and clients no matter how much you hate it. I'm so jealous of you. Since you have it so easy, the least you could do is make some more elaborate meals."
It's true that working from home means less human drama and allows me to focus on my job in peace. But since I only get paid based on output, there's no stability. I'm constantly anxious and under pressure. It's really tough. The atmosphere between us was getting worse by the day. I was growing increasingly worried about our future. Even so, there was a time when we had considered having a child. I had hoped that becoming a father would instill a sense of responsibility in Robert and make him a bit more gentle. I also wanted to finish having kids before I got too much older. But that dream never came to fruition. I did manage to get pregnant once. We were overjoyed at the time, but I miscarried before even reaching the 6-month mark. The pain from that experience is something I still can't forget. The guilt of not being able to bring the baby in my belly into this world. Even if it was just a fetus, the overwhelming grief of losing our precious child's life was unbearable. During that time, I couldn't focus on work at all and spent every day crying in despair.
Guess it was so uncomfortable inside your womb that it figured it was better off dead.
Robert had said mockingly, looking down on me as I lay in bed, not showing an ounce of concern or care.
So we have to start all over again from conception? What a pain. Can you even still get pregnant at your age?
His words, devoid of any sensitivity, cut into me, wounding my heart even further. The one who saved me from hitting rock bottom was my mother-in-law, Melissa. Ever since we got married, I had a good relationship with her. She would come visit our home and we would exchange messages. We'd share recommended recipes and beauty products, building a friendship despite needing to be somewhat reserved. When Melissa found out about my miscarriage, she grieved and comforted me as if it had happened to her. One time, Robert spat out the cruel words,
"Such a defective product you are. Can't even properly give birth despite being a woman," right in front of Melissa.
She flew into a rage. Grabbing him by the collar, she said,
"Robert, how could you? Sit down right there. I can't believe you'd blame the miscarriage on Jessica. She did nothing wrong. Sometimes these things just happen on a whim of God's will. To think you'd grow up to have such a twisted personality and way of speaking without even learning about this. I don't remember raising a son like you."
She gave him a thorough scolding. Seeing that, when his attitude had been wearing down my spirit, somehow made me feel a bit lighter. And for Melissa, who had protected me, I felt a surge of gratitude and affection from the bottom of my heart. When Robert wasn't around, she confided in me that she had also experienced a miscarriage. It had happened to a baby she conceived before Robert. I was certain there was a baby in here, but I couldn't bring it into the world. I was so sad and frustrated, I blamed myself too. Medical knowledge wasn't as advanced back then, and the causes weren't clear. They even told me there was a real possibility it was the mother's body's fault. My mother-in-law harshly criticized me for it. I wanted to tell you from my heart that it wasn't your fault. Melissa's words as she held my hand were painful to hear, making my chest tighten. If my body couldn't give birth, I thought about dying together with my lost baby so many times.
Melissa, don't say that.
I responded. When I blurted that out, Melissa smiled.
It's okay. I'm still here living now, and after that I had Robert and 2 more children. So it's all right. I'm sure you'll be able to give birth to your next baby. But it's painful right now, isn't it? You can let your guard down with me. Even if it's just to chat and take your mind off things for a bit, that's fine. It's been a few years since my husband passed away, so I have all the time in the world. Reach out to me anytime.
Those warm, loving words made my eyes well up. Before I knew it, I was clinging to Melissa, tears streaming down my face. After that incident, my bond with her deepened. We became connected by a powerful tie, like a real family, maybe even stronger. However, Robert remained the same as ever. Even when I recovered and was able to do my job and housework like before, his cold attitude persisted. He stopped hurling verbal abuse, but we never had any pleasant conversations either. The only words he uttered at home were things like,
"I'm tired. Is dinner not ready?"
as he came home and tossed his jacket on the couch. Or,
"I have a business dinner with a client the day after tomorrow, so prepare some kind of gift,"
while leaving his finished dishes lying around without cleaning up. It was as if he treated me like a servant. Other than that, he mostly ignored me, acting like I was invisible. I wondered if there was any meaning to this completely frigid married life. On the other hand, my relationship with Melissa continued. In addition to exchanging messages, we would meet up a few times a month to have coffee or go shopping together. It was precisely because I had a good relationship with Melissa that I was afraid of confiding in her, getting divorced, and then losing that connection. Robert started putting even less money into our household. Despite working in sales and supposedly earning money, all he contributed was the bare minimum for living expenses.
"You're earning money too, so this should be enough to get by, right?"
He unilaterally decided, not even giving me room to discuss it. It felt like he was saying, "I'm giving you money, so don't complain." There were no sudden flashy changes in his belongings or clothes. I never suspected infidelity, like finding lipstick on his shirts. He just kept saying work was getting busy, that he had more difficult clients, and his business trips and overnight stays increased. I wondered, does he dislike being at home that much? If he's going to treat me like I don't exist, why doesn't Robert bring up divorce? A few months passed and I got used to living frugally. All my efforts in housework and my job started to be recognized, and I began getting even more work than before. The rates from my longtime clients went up, and I got a steady stream of new projects through referrals. As I got busier, my career really took off. Naturally, my earnings increased too. I felt a bit relieved, thinking that if I could keep working at this pace, I might be able to save up some money despite Robert's meager contributions. It happened one day.
"What, another business trip? Didn't you just go on one last week?"
I was shocked when Robert, who had only left for a trip a few days ago, said he was going away again for 2 nights and 3 days. Wasn't this way too frequent? Business trips are normal for a salesman, but I hadn't heard anything about him changing departments since we got married. Such a sudden, drastic change in his work environment seemed unnatural.
"I already told you. I have this annoying client who keeps calling me out to rural areas. Unlike you, who just exchanges messages online, I earn my money by pounding the pavement."
He snapped at me, then tossed an empty suitcase in front of me, telling me to pack his things if I understood. Why do I have to do this? That thought crushed my heart as I silently stared down at the suitcase. Paying no attention to me, he ate his dinner and took a shower as he pleased before going to sleep. Even when I approached the bed, he was snoring loudly, showing no signs of waking up. His smartphone lay right in front of me. If I used his fingerprint to unlock it, I could easily peek inside. But if I found decisive evidence, it would surely lead to divorce. Then I'd have no choice but to explain it to Melissa. If we got divorced, I didn't think we could continue our relationship like before. But maybe, even if I confessed to Melissa, she might scold Robert, saying this is my son's fault, and we could remain friends, not as mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. As I picked up Robert's smartphone to bring it close to his finger, the screen suddenly lit up. A large notification from a messaging app displayed a clearly feminine name.
Can't wait for our weekend trip. Last week was shopping, so this time let's relax and get cozy at AL Hotel.
Strangely, no anger welled up in me. If anything, I almost felt joy at having obtained evidence to claim compensation from Robert and this woman. Seizing the chance while he was in a deep, drunken sleep, I unlocked Robert's smartphone and opened the messaging app. I quickly took photos of the screen with my own smartphone and slowly scrolled. I captured a video of all their message exchanges, seemingly from when they first started their affair. There were even naked photos taken on a bed. I had to fight to keep my hands from shaking. Then I scrutinized whether Robert's overnight stays were really for business or to meet this woman. Apparently not everything was a lie. It seemed he actually went on real business trips once in a while. Even after all this, Robert showed no signs of waking up. Gathering the evidence was so easy it gave me goosebumps. It was so sloppily managed, as if he had no intention of hiding the affair, that it made my head spin. The next morning, Robert showed no sense that anything was amiss. As usual, he sat waiting for breakfast to be served, complained about the seasoning, looked down on my work, and grumbled about how tough he had it. Even as I watched his back leaving through the front door, my heart remained strangely calm. I even had the presence of mind to wonder if I should look for a lawyer. Perhaps because I had stopped saying anything, Robert seemed to be in a slightly better mood. When the weekend arrived, he unusually said,
I'm off.
Before leaving for his business trip, no, his adultery trip. As I was tidying up around the house and debating whether to go grocery shopping for dinner, my smartphone rang from an unexpected caller. Robert has one younger brother and one younger sister. The call was from my brother-in-law, Kevin. Kevin is also married, but I heard he lives with his parents to save up for a house.
Hello?
When I answered, I heard a voice that sounded more dejected than when we last met. Jessica, I'm sorry for the sudden call. Actually, our mother, she suddenly passed away.
What? No way, there must be some mistake.
I let out a scream-like voice. Images of Melissa, who I had spent so much time with, flashed through my mind. Her smile when we enjoyed coffee together. Her serious expression when she was there to listen. And her warm demeanor as she supported me when I was hurting from the miscarriage. The sudden news that she had left this world felt like a stab to my heart. It's true. This morning, she suddenly collapsed. We called an ambulance right away, but she was already. I'm sorry, is Robert there? I tried contacting him but couldn't get through. I hesitated for a moment when asked. I was overcome by the urge to spill everything to Kevin right then and there, but now wasn't the time. Somehow, I restrained myself, knowing this wasn't what I should be telling him now.
I'm sorry, he's not here right now. He said he's on a business trip. I'm sure you have a lot to deal with too. Should I tell him for you?
I understand. Then could I ask you to do that? Honestly, there's so much to do, I can't even make phone calls. After that, I expressed my condolences to Kevin again and told him I would come help if he needed anything before ending the call. Then I immediately tried to contact Robert. Amidst the intense pain in my chest from losing Melissa, who I was so close with, I felt irritated at Robert for not answering the phone. When he finally picked up after over 10 rings, Robert's voice was clearly displeased.
Hello? You finally answered. Actually, Melissa is...
As I tried to speak, Robert cut me off, saying,
Huh? What about Mom? I told you I'm on a business trip. Don't call me about stupid things.
For a moment, I stopped breathing. He was annoyed that his wife called him in the middle of his adultery trip. Realizing that made my head burn with anger.
Come back right now. Melissa collapsed this morning. Shut up.
I spoke in a strong tone, feeling I had to tell him no matter what, but it must have really gotten on his nerves because Robert yelled over me.
If it was really important, Mom would contact me herself. The fact that she hasn't means it's nothing major. I'm working, don't call me, you shut in.
He ranted on in an intense voice, then hung up on me unilaterally. I stood there stunned, my hand shaking as I held my smartphone, shocked and confused. He wouldn't even listen, even though it was about his own mother. No matter how many times I called, I couldn't get through. Eventually, an announcement played saying the phone was turned off or out of range. It's hopeless. I took a deep breath. If he hates talking to me that much, if he's telling me not to call, then I'll obey. He said it himself, so he has no right to complain later. I left a note on the dining room table that simply read, "I'm going to your parents' house," quickly packed my things, and left. I arrived at my in-laws' house in the evening. In the midst of the chaos, Kevin and Alice greeted me. On the living room table was a list of things the remaining family members needed to do, with documents scattered about. I'm sorry. We still have so many calls to make and things to take care of. We haven't had a chance to clean up yet. No, I'm the one who should apologize for coming alone at a time like this. It's okay, but what did Robert say? Is he coming later? Kevin, who had assumed we would come together, furrowed his brow suspiciously at the sight of me alone. Alice also looked outside with a puzzled expression, checking if Robert's car was there. I felt guilty. Mustering my courage, I told them about my phone call with Robert a few hours ago. A painfully heavy silence fell, and Alice was the first to speak up.
Unbelievable.
Alice was the first to raise her voice.
I can't believe him. What is he thinking?
She was probably trying to contain her anger. Alice's face turned bright red as she clenched her fists tightly, making them tremble.
That idiot. Is it okay to contact him now?
Kevin muttered in a terrifyingly low voice. Looking closely at the memo Kevin was holding, I saw the name of a funeral home and the number of people they wanted to invite. Next to the word chief mourner, the characters for eldest son were written, along with Robert's name. Perhaps noticing my gaze, Kevin let go of the memo. I'm sorry, the funeral home told me the eldest son usually acts as the chief mourner, so I told them Robert would do it. I'll try contacting the funeral home. Right, we need to let them know as soon as we figured it out. Kevin immediately called the funeral home and changed the chief mourner to himself. They let me stay over that night. The next morning, Kevin hurriedly left to file the death certificate and other paperwork. I put all my effort into informing relatives who I couldn't reach yesterday about Melissa's passing and preparing for the wake. When the wake began, many people came to see Melissa despite the short notice. Each time, they asked why Robert wasn't there. I explained that he was away on an unavoidable business trip. Some were appalled, others angry. A few even tried contacting Robert on the spot. However, Robert must have kept his phone off because he didn't respond to anyone. The next day, after a tumultuous night, I collapsed into bed. The funeral started, and I managed to see Melissa off. But when it came time to say our final goodbyes, I couldn't hold back my tears at Melissa's serene expression. I wept openly, embracing Alice as we mourned the loss of Melissa.
Not many daughter-in-law are this close with their mother-in-law. I'm sure Mom was happy to have gotten along so well with you, Jessica.
Kevin comforted me with those words. The three of us returned to my in-laws' house, sharing memories of Melissa and shedding tears together. In the end, there was no contact from Robert. From the next day onward, we spent a hectic few days paying for the funeral expenses and entertaining Melissa's friends who visited the house. 3 days flew by. Then, the front door of my in-laws' house was roughly flung open. Heavy footsteps resounded as Robert barged into the living room.
How long are you gonna mooch off other people's homes, you shut in? Abandoning our house, what the hell were you doing?
The moment he saw me, Robert started yelling. Then he noticed Kevin and Alice with me and raised his eyebrows. Seemingly calming down for a second, he looked around, appearing puzzled by the thoroughly cleaned-up living room.
What guests? More importantly, where's Mom? I'm thirsty.
At those words, Alice quietly stood up. But Kevin was faster. He dashed right up to Robert and swung his right fist straight at Robert's face. Robert let out a scream as he fell backward with a loud thud. Kevin straddled him and grabbed Robert by the collar.
Mom is dead. The wake and funeral are already over. How dare you show your face now?
The image of the calm and polite Kevin was instantly shattered. His face bright red, he shouted with enough force to send spit flying. Robert wore a dumbfounded expression, as if forgetting the pain in his cheek. Gradually, the meaning of the words seemed to sink in. His face turned just as red with anger as his, and he yelled back.
I never heard about that. Why didn't anyone tell me something so important? We did contact you. Me, Alice, and Jessica. You must have gotten dozens of calls from relatives too.
At Kevin's retort, Robert choked on his words and averted his gaze. I don't know when Robert turned his phone back on, but the total number of calls about Melissa's passing easily exceeded 50. It was probably hard for him to pretend he hadn't seen or heard about it. Still, unwilling to admit his own fault, he glared at me.
It's your fault for not getting to the point. If you had properly told me about Mom, I would have apologized to my client and come straight home.
You didn't even try to listen, did you? Alice's icy voice drowned out Robert's angry shout. In contrast to Kevin, who was still trembling with rage, Alice glared up at Robert without even trying to hide her disdain.
You guys! Don't you think she might be lying?
That's impossible. I have a recording of that call. Want to hear it? When I showed my smartphone, his eyes went wide. I actually have all my phone calls automatically recorded. Unlike meetings on the computer, calls that come in on my smartphone often involve minor revisions or additions. Because they're so easily conveyed, pointless disputes about who said what tend to happen later. It's a handy feature for keeping track of pushy salespeople and who they are. I use it all the time. Naturally, my conversation with Robert was recorded too. I had already let Kevin and Alice listen to it. Robert's eyes widened as he glared up at us.
Also, Robert, you're lying. I checked with your company. They said there's no business trip right now. Apparently, you've been taking consecutive vacation days. You investigated me at my workplace?
Indeed. Alice, who works at the same company as Robert, had grown suspicious of him and asked his department to look into it.
Well, of course I'd be worried and curious if you were too busy to even attend your own mother's funeral. Or what, do you have something to hide?
Kevin, who had been silent until now, looked up with a pale face and a grave expression.
Hey, what have you been doing while taking all those vacation days?
Robert loudly and brazenly insisted.
Work, obviously. Sometimes I have to take time off for business dinners with clients. You guys wouldn't understand.
As Robert shouted, I turned on my smartphone. It contained the evidence of his infidelity that I had previously gathered.
A trip with your mistress, right?
I said, showing my smartphone to Kevin and Alice.
Hey, what are you talking about? Don't make baseless accusations.
Ignoring Robert's flustered yelling, I showed them images of his message exchanges with the woman, receipts from brand name stores where he likely bought her gifts. There was even a photo of the two of them with their arms linked. Anyone could understand the situation from this. Of course, I was also able to show them screenshots of messages they had exchanged right before this latest trip.
What the hell? I can't believe this. Neglecting Mom for a trip with this woman, are you out of your mind? And what's with these messages? They're so sickly sweet it's gross.
Alice immediately expressed her disgust. Kevin turned a ghastly pale face towards Robert, seemingly unable to process the situation.
Not just the trip. This is a betrayal of Jessica. And buying so many expensive gifts for your mistress is a huge blow to your household finances.
For Kevin, who is trying hard to save money right now, financial issues must hit close to home. The fact that Robert had been spending lavishly on his mistress while barely contributing to their household was unforgivable to him.
Wait a second. What are you looking at?
Robert, now furious, snatched the smartphone from us. He looked at the contents and then bore down on me with an intensity that suggested he might grab me at any moment.
When did you get this? You snooped through my private messages with my girlfriend?
After Kevin managed to restrain Robert's hands as he roughly grabbed my clothes, Robert violently threw my smartphone on the floor, as if venting his frustration. The loud noise reverberated painfully through the tense room.
It's not like I wanted to do this. But you were clearly suspicious. Unnaturally frequent business trips, never coming home. Barely contributing any of your earnings to the household. Nothing but thoughtless words towards me. I knew something was up,
I retorted, picking up my smartphone.
Then by chance, I saw a message from your mistress. I easily found tons of other evidence in the bedroom too. You were so bad at hiding it, I was appalled despite being the one cheated on.
At that, Robert exploded with rage.
Shut up with your nagging! When a man has a wife and family, achieves results at work and earns money, women naturally flock to him. In a man's world, that factors into your reputation. What? Would you rather have a husband who can't attract people and can't get ahead?
Hearing that, I instinctively hung my head. Not because I was hurt. It was such an absurdly shameless excuse that I couldn't help but laugh. Somehow, I put on a straight face. After taking a deep breath, I yelled a verbal blow at him.
You can only say that after you properly cherish your family. You have no right to talk about being a good husband. Don't ever come back to our house again.
Well, in the end, Kevin and Alice promptly declared they were cutting ties with Robert. Treating his spouse like trash and cheating, then getting furious without any remorse, plus his heartless attitude about his mother's death for those two, it was more than enough reason to stop being family. I cleared out all of his belongings from our home and started a comfortable life living alone. And of course, to properly deal with his infidelity, I consulted a lawyer about compensation. Shockingly, his mistress was a woman from one of his company's business partners. When Alice asked around the company after seeing the evidence photos I had already gathered, she was quickly identified.
This is so terrible, it makes me sick. That woman is awful too. I'll have to reconsider our relationship with them.
Alice said that while sharing the information about the mistress she had found on social media with me. Sometime after the compensation amount was decided and I sent Robert the official notice. He started contacting me repeatedly on my smartphone. Things like,
"Give me a break. Those two kicked me out of my family home too, so I had no choice but to rent a cheap apartment. You think I can live like this?"
And,
"That compensation amount is absurd. You're the one who snooped through my private life, right? You're making it sound like I'm the only one at fault."
Even now, Robert was still complaining to me without understanding his own wrongdoings. I was dumbfounded as I blocked his number. Then a few days later, he started barging into my house directly. When I opened the front door thinking it was someone else, there stood Robert, looking much more unkempt than before.
"Why are you here? I told you to never come back to this house."
When I coldly rebuffed him, he put on an unpleasant grin and said, "Fine, I get it. I won't come inside. But at least do something about the money. The compensation is way too high. I barely have enough to get by. I can't even buy a new suit. It's a huge problem for a top salesman like me. Come on, you can at least do that much, right?" The nerve of him, shamelessly trying to mooch money off me like that.
"Why don't you go ask that woman you traveled with to support you instead?"
When I said that snidely, Robert bit his lip in vexation, furrowing his brow.
"It's because you demanded such a huge compensation that we ended up breaking up."
I see, so basically, her boyfriend went from being loaded to being poor, and that's why she dumped him. It seems he had been lavishing her with expensive branded goods and frequently taking her on extravagant trips. So that woman was just as terrible, only seeing Robert for his money. I retorted.
"Is that so? But you're someone who's valued at work, earning a good living. Unlike me, you're an admirable person thriving in a company. In that case, take care of yourself. Well then, goodbye."
With that, I slammed the front door shut. Then I promptly contacted my lawyer. Before long, Robert was slapped with a restraining order against contacting me. He had truly squandered all his earnings on his mistress and wanton spending. On top of that, because he had completely left all household matters to me, he lacked any life skills. Now living in an apartment, he could barely manage household chores and was leading a desolate life. His unkempt appearance when he barged into my house was the result of his lack of ability to take care of himself. There was no way he could manage as a salesman like that. Not only did he look a mess, he couldn't even cook. Subsisting on junk food day after day, his health deteriorated. He became unable to work, and a few months later, I heard he was fired from the company. I learned about this from Alice, who works at the same company. Naturally, Robert couldn't find a good new job. He struck out on every attempt to transition to a full-time position. But he needed to get his life back on track and pay the compensation. A few months later, Alice told me she had seen him looking pale, working a part-time job directing traffic on a road she passed during a business trip. After constantly looking down on others and persisting in his selfish behavior, Robert ended up stuck in a low-paying part-time job with no freedom. As for his mistress, it seems her parents were furious at her for having a relationship with a married man and indulging in a lavish lifestyle. All the shopping and trips she had enjoyed to the fullest were now forbidden. Under her parents' strict supervision, she was forced to take an unwanted job. She's now working every day under tremendous stress, suffocated by a life with zero freedom in both her professional and private life. After that, I combined my savings up until then with the compensation money and promptly moved to a new place. The condominium I had been living in was a place I had shared with Robert. Just residing there brought back unpleasant memories. I wanted to get away from there as quickly as possible. I was still steadily taking on more and more projects at work, building a solid track record while earning the trust of multiple clients. A fulfilling life dedicated to my work, living on my own. I made a fresh start in my new life. A few months later, I began dating a man I met at a cafe I had started frequenting in my new town. He works in product planning and development at a major corporation. He was very interested in and respected my work as a web designer. And I was drawn to his calm demeanor and logical, level-headed personality. I'm sure he would never cheat or betray and abandon his family. A few years later, I married him, and we were blessed with a child. This time, no dangerous situations arose, and our baby is growing healthily in my belly. My new husband is very considerate of me during my pregnancy, which has been a huge help. Right now, the two of us are eagerly awaiting the birth of our child while advancing our careers and preparing for the delivery. A kind husband and a new family member on the way. A loving, peaceful home awaits me. Hey, where are you going at this time? As soon as James saw the incoming call on his cell phone, he stopped eating and went back to his room, grabbing his coat to head out. It was supposed to be a rare family time together.
No, I just got a call from Mom saying she fell at home and can't move, so I need to help her. I'm taking her to the night clinic now. Don't worry about anything, you too.
With that, James rushed out of the house. I just watched him leave as usual, but he has been totally indifferent to Betty so far. And yet, now he's suddenly concerned about Betty. And that phone call, I only saw it for a moment, but the caller ID seemed to be set to private. It doesn't make sense to have your own mother's number on private. His behavior just now raised my suspicions all at once. A few minutes after James left, the doorbell suddenly rang. Elizabeth, good evening. I heard you were feeling under the weather, so I made some stew and brought it over. What's going on here? Opening the door, there stood Betty, who was supposed to be unable to move after falling, holding a pot in both hands.
Betty! Just now, James left saying you had fallen and couldn't move.
That's when I was certain. James had lied about Betty being immobile and even trampled on our family time to go somewhere. My name is Elizabeth. Currently, I live with my husband James and our elementary school son Mark, just the three of us. Life hasn't been easy with the recent rise in prices, but we're a close-knit family of three. We met in college. I happened to stop by a cafe where James was working as a waiter. Being shy, I was so nervous about his good looks that I couldn't speak properly as a customer, a memory I still recall. Was this love at first sight? As someone who had never believed in love at first sight, thinking it was more of a superstition, I became confused about what to do. I asked for advice from a high school friend who was experienced in love.
Why don't you just talk to him if you're interested? Otherwise, nothing will start, right?
Through high school, I only had 2 boyfriends, so what my friend was suggesting seemed like a big challenge.
Yeah, I get that, but, I'm shy, and I get even more nervous around him.
I just can't bring myself to speak. After about 10 minutes of thinking, we decided that if I couldn't do it alone, we'd go together. So, after university classes, we headed to the cafe where he was likely to be. When we arrived, I saw him at the register.
Now's your chance to talk to him.
My friend encouraged me as we joined the line to order. Finally, it was my turn. As I approached him, my heart raced even more. He prompted me to order, and I finally spoke up.
I'd like a cafe latte, please. And, would you like to be friends with me?
The first words I managed to muster came out louder than I could control, audible to other customers in line at the cafe. Embarrassed by being overheard, my shyness kicked in, and my face turned beet red. I hastily passed my order and payment to my friend and dashed out of the cafe. I thought it was over. But my boldness turned out to be a good thing. My friend followed me out, and to my surprise, he followed her. It seemed he was curious about my behavior at the cafe, and since he was on his break, he came after us. I managed to exchange contact information with him, and after hanging out as friends for 6 months, I confessed my feelings. He had developed feelings for me too, and we started dating. After years of dating and living together, we decided to get married. Our son Mark was born, and though life is hectic with childcare and housework, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's amazing how the fatigue doesn't matter when you're working for your family. I never thought marriage was for me, but once I had a family, my perspective changed completely. However, there's been one major concern in our marriage. Recently, James has been coming home unusually late. Before, he would let me know when he was leaving work, saying, "I'm heading home now." But lately, there's been no such communication, and coming home in the morning has become the norm. He's never worn cologne before, but sometimes he comes home covered in a sweet scent. I confronted James about it, but he always brushes it off, saying he's tired from work or that it's just business entertainment. I knew I needed to face the truth. But thinking about my family, especially Mark, I couldn't bring myself to consider divorce. The only person I could talk to about this was my mother-in-law, Betty. Despite our age difference, we clicked at a family meeting and have been close ever since, more like friends than in-laws. Betty has always been there for me, listening to my struggles with housework and parenting, always taking my side. But this time, I hesitated to talk to her, fearing it might worry her or add to her stress. A few years ago, during a visit, Betty fell ill. It wasn't serious, but given her age, she couldn't lead the same life as before. When I told James that Betty was unwell, he didn't show any concern and returned the next evening, reeking of perfume, saying he couldn't leave work. I was so angry I was nearly at my breaking point. But Betty, ever calm, simply soothed my anger without a word of complaint. Since Betty's hospitalization and return, I've been helping her with household chores and going shopping together. At first, she seemed guilty for accepting my help, but she warmed up when I told her I wanted to assist.
"Elizabeth, thank you so much. You make every day enjoyable for me." "No, thank you. I've learned so much from you, Betty. I enjoy our talks too."
Betty's simple
"Thank you"
means so much to me, someone who rarely receives gratitude. I've resolved to protect Betty. And it was on one such evening. Today, James came home early for a change, and we were going to have dinner as a family for the first time in a while. When James texted that he was leaving work on time, I was so happy I decided to make an extra dish to celebrate, rummaging through the fridge and cooking with joy. Mark, doing his homework in the living room, noticed my good mood and asked,
"Mom, what's up? You seem happy." "Oh? Does it show?" "Well, James is coming home early for once. I'm happy we can have a family dinner together.
Mark's response was lukewarm, perhaps due to his age, but I'm sure he was happy inside. I watched his back as he returned to his homework, and I continued cooking. About 30 minutes later, James came home, and we sat down for a rare family dinner. I made hamburgers at Mark's request and prepared some snacks for James, laying them out on the table. We talked about school, recent events, and other family matters as we ate. Mark, initially aloof, warmed up as the meal progressed, even chatting with James. Family meals like this are so enjoyable. Even if James comes home late, smelling of sweet perfume, moments like this make the bad feelings fade away. I'm realizing that all over again. As we were finishing dinner, James's mobile phone rang, interrupting our family conversation. He glanced at his phone, suddenly stopped eating, and went to his room to grab his coat, as if he was about to leave somewhere.
Hey, where are you going at this time? No, I just got a call saying Mom has fallen at home and can't move, so I'm taking her to the night clinic. Don't worry about a thing, both of you.
James said that and left the house in a hurry. I watched him go, even though he never showed any interest in Betty before. It was strange that he suddenly seemed concerned about her. And about that call, I only caught a glimpse, but it looked like the caller ID was set to private. It's odd to have your own mother's number set as private. I was just feeling good about our family time, but his actions raised suspicions. Then, the doorbell rang.
Elizabeth, good evening. I heard you were feeling ill, so I brought some stew.
What's going on here? To my surprise, Betty, who was supposed to be unable to move, stood at the door holding a pot.
Betty! James just left saying you had fallen and couldn't move.
I invited Betty in to compare our stories. According to her, James told her not to come near our house, claiming I was ill and resting. She tried to contact him several times to check on me, but he either dodged the questions or assured her that everything was fine, seemingly trying to keep us apart. Now, I was certain. James lied about Betty being immobile and even trampled on our family time to see someone else. I reached my limit and activated a GPS device I had previously installed in the car for emergencies. According to the GPS, James was heading downtown, likely towards the hotel district. Betty peered over my shoulder at my phone, watching James's GPS movements.
If you want to divorce James, I'll support you. I'm on your side, Elizabeth.
Her words lifted a weight off my shoulders. Empowered by Betty's support, I decided to confront James. The GPS showed his location stopped right in front of a hotel, seemingly confirming his infidelity. However, GPS location information isn't always absolute. It's possible that it's slightly off, and he might not be at the hotel. To confirm his whereabouts, I tried calling James, but after a few rings, the call was disconnected without an answer, and when I tried again, the phone was turned off. Although I had some hope when making the call, there's nothing I can do if his phone is off.
Let's leave it for now. We'll talk to James when he comes home tomorrow.
With that, I ended the day quietly with Mark and Betty. The next morning, before waking up Mark, I checked the living room to see if James had returned, but he hadn't. The quiet living room, lit only by the morning sun through the curtains, was empty.
He didn't come back. It's really over, isn't it?
As noon approached, James finally returned, still in the same clothes as when he left.
Welcome back, James.
We need to talk.
What? I'm tired from taking Mom to the night clinic and staying with her. Can we talk later?
James scratched his head and sighed, attempting to head to his room. But Betty appeared behind me and blocked his way.
You said you were taking your mother to the clinic because she couldn't move? Explain exactly what you mean by that.
James's face, which had been calm, suddenly turned pale. Understandably so. He was supposed to have rushed out last night to help his mother, yet here she was, healthy and with me. Unable to say anything, James quietly followed us to the living room, where he saw my parents, who I had called earlier. Realizing the situation, He sat down without being asked and prepared himself to listen.
James, you know why we are all gathered here. Tell us the reason yourself.
Under Betty's intense questioning, James, sweating profusely, hung his head in silence.
If you won't talk, I will. Last night, you said you were taking Betty to the night clinic because she was injured. But actually, you were in the hotel district, weren't you? And I didn't fall or get hurt. You also kept me away from the house, saying Elizabeth was ill. You didn't want me coming over because it was inconvenient, right?
I pulled out my mobile phone and showed the evidence that the last GPS location was a hotel. James was shocked to realize that his location was being shared with me. It had been easy to track James. I've been busy with childcare and housework, and out of good conscience, this was the first time I activated the app because of this incident. James looked at me, wanting to ask how I installed the app, but given the situation, he couldn't bring it up. That makes sense. If he questioned me about it, it would be like admitting he was in a suspicious place. If he doesn't say anything, no matter the evidence, the truth won't be fully revealed. He probably calculated it that way. But Betty and I wouldn't let that strategy work. We were determined to uncover the truth.
James, would you care to explain? No, this is...
Just then, James's phone vibrated with a notification. Seeing his expression cloud over, I quickly grabbed the phone and saw a message from a woman saying, "You forgot something." Attached was a photo of a young woman, probably in her 20s, holding James's coin case.
Who is this young lady? You're not going to say something transparent like she's a junior at work, are you?
James's face turned from pale to white, not expecting such definitive proof from his affair partner. James had been silent, trying to hide the truth, but now there was no escape.
James, call this woman right now. And make sure she explains everything.
Betty's tone was unlike anything I had heard from her before. The words Betty hurled at James were immensely heavy. I got goosebumps from the sheer intensity of it. James, without any resistance to that overpowering presence, obediently called the other woman, putting her on speakerphone so that everyone present could hear the conversation. The woman, named Lisa, sounded like she was in her early 20s, a typical modern girl. Was she really James's type?
You were with James yesterday, weren't you? Did you know he's married, or did you meet him unaware of his marital status?
Yes, I knew.
James told me himself. He's always complaining about his personal life every time we meet at the hotel. Honestly, listening to him has been exhausting. So, you knew he was married, met him at the hotel, and even called him to the hotel district yesterday?
Well, yes, I called him, but he was the one who forgot about the hotel reservation we had.
So I just wanted to know what he planned to do about it.
This meant that James left the house last night because he received a call about an appointment he had forgotten. He chose his affair over family time. The James who used to be kind and cared about his family had changed somehow after marrying me and the birth of Mark. It was more of a feeling of emptiness than sadness or anger. Mom looked puzzled, and Dad seemed ready to punch James any moment.
In truth, I've been aware of James's womanizing for a while now. I kept silent because I didn't want to worry everyone. I thought about divorce, but I didn't want Mark to suffer with a single mother. So that's why you seemed down when you visited me. Did it show on my face?
Not exactly, but I'm a mother too, Elizabeth, and we've known each other for a long time. I just had a feeling you were troubled. I thought I was suppressing these feelings to avoid burdening anyone, but maybe deep down, I was silently crying for help, wanting someone to notice. But now, I don't have to worry about that anymore. I've opened up about my feelings, and everyone understands. It's all been cleared away.
I can't be with someone like you anymore, who has a bad track record with women and doesn't care about his family. I want a divorce.
Finally, I was able to voice my feelings to James. Then, James, who had been silent, finally spoke up with a sigh.
It's actually your fault, you know? Before we got married, you were all womanly, but after we got married, you lost all your charm. That's why I'm having fun with young, cute girls like Lisa. What's wrong with that?
His brazen defiance and unjustified blame-shifting made my anger boil. The audacity of his claims was infuriating. Certainly, since Mark was born, I've been so busy with housework and childcare that I hardly had any time or energy for myself. But I did it because I believed family happiness was important. I was content not spending time or money on myself if it meant my family could live happily. This man trampled on all those feelings and got caught up with a young girl, putting his family second, if not completely out of his mind. Probably, James thinks that providing money for the house is enough.
Do you have any idea how hard it is to be a mother? I gave up everything to raise you, doing housework and childcare. James, you really are a hopeless man. James, that's too much. You've gone too far.
Despite the severe criticism from everyone, James, who had completely defiant, showed no damage, leaning back in his chair and fiddling with his mobile phone. There was no sign of remorse. No, even if he did feel remorse, it wouldn't make a difference now, but you'd think our words would at least resonate with him a little. However, there was no sign of that in James. The conversation that started in the afternoon continued for hours, and Mark came home from school. I'm home. Oh, why is everyone here?
Hey, Mark.
Welcome back. Listen to this. Mark gave James, who clung to him, a cold look. Please don't touch me.
I can't think of a person who meets other women outside and neglects our family and hurts Mom as my dad.
Mark, despite his young age, seemed to understand everything. Everyone was surprised by his words. We never mentioned James's infidelity to anyone, let alone within the family. In fact, we never even discussed James's womanizing behavior. But somehow, Mark knew about James's affairs.
Mark, are you going to abandon me too? Who raised you and bought you everything you wanted? It was me, right?
No, Mom raised me. She made meals even when she was busy.
Sure, the money was yours, but everything I wanted was bought by Mom. That's thanks to me, isn't it? Who do you think allows you to live in this house and have a comfortable life? It's all because of my hard work. Show some gratitude.
At James's words, show some gratitude. I found myself moving unconsciously, and before I knew it, I had slapped James across the face with force.
How dare you say show some gratitude? Do you know how much I've struggled, keeping our finances in order for our future, cleaning the lipstick off your suit collars? Suit collars? You can't mean.
I fetched a shirt from the laundry basket and threw it at James, now collapsed on the floor.
Do you know? Lipstick on a shirt comes off when you gently hand wash it in warm water and then apply detergent directly to the stain. I learned that to clean up after your affairs. Have you ever thought about how I felt doing that? Of course, you haven't.
After my outburst, I suddenly caught my breath. On the floor lay James, holding his red and swollen cheek, looking up at me. How much had I suffered for this man?
By now, even you must understand, right? Divorce Elizabeth immediately. And as an apology for all the stress you've caused, vow never to contact her, me, or us ever again. Don't come near Mom, me, or even Grandpa and Grandma anymore. You've never been, and certainly aren't now, my dad. Just get out.
With Mark also abandoning him, James, who thought he had an ally in his son, lost his place. I demanded a divorce and compensation, declaring that he would never get custody of Mark. My parents refused any further contact with James and deleted his information, while Betty, even though he was her only son, decided to cut ties right there. James, rejected by everyone, left the house without much resistance, walking towards the bustling streets under the evening sky. Later, I learned that Lisa, his affair partner, was also married and facing a hefty compensation claim from her husband. It seemed unlikely that young Lisa could afford it, but that was her problem. James signed the divorce papers without hesitation and agreed to pay alimony and child support until Mark graduated from high school. But this drastically changed his comfortable, somewhat extravagant lifestyle. Now living in an old apartment on the outskirts of town, he struggles financially. Mainly because he never learned to cook and resorts to fast food and instant noodles. All of this is a result of James's own actions, his fault. I decided to move back to my parents' house in Dallas with Mark. Though it meant changing schools for personal reasons, Mark agreed without complaint, which was a relief. Mark's friends looked a bit sad, but Mark, having matured a bit through this incident, comforted them, saying, "I'll definitely come to visit." Despite being the one transferring, I am proud of how strong my son has grown. Betty and I remained close even after the divorce. Despite initially refusing, I accepted some financial help from her, as she insisted on supporting us due to her son's actions. This helped us avoid financial difficulties. Now, we sometimes have dinner together, and Betty even sends gifts for Mark's birthday. Mark seems happy, surrounded by many people. With my parents helping out on weekdays, I've returned to my pre-marriage pharmacy job and am enjoying fulfilling workdays. Now when I come home, Mark and my parents welcome me. Surrounding the dinner table with my family is my happiest moment. I really need to talk to Lynn about something. Emily, my daughter-in-law, seems to hesitate for a moment, taking a deep breath. But then, as if she's made up her mind, she starts to speak with determination. I'm sorry, but I just can't do it anymore. I can't afford to pay $3,000 every month for Brian's care. It's just too much for me. She said this through tears. I couldn't understand what Emily was talking about. Paying $3,000 a month for care? What are you talking about? Brian passed away 8 years ago. You should know that.
What? But Ridley said we needed money for the care. I wasn't told he passed away. I don't understand what's happening.
Emily seemed genuinely unaware. Even I am struggling to grasp the situation, but it's an undeniable fact that my husband Brian has passed away.
I really wasn't told about his passing. It's the truth.
Emily was desperately trying to make her case. Based on Emily's behavior up until now, I was convinced she wasn't lying, and I knew she wasn't the type to make up such a story.
About 6 months ago, Ridley came to me saying we needed money for Brian's care. He said our parents had sent us a lot of money during our student days, and now it was his turn to send money.
Hearing Emily's frail voice, I felt a rage like never before. I could easily imagine how troubled Emily had been. I was convinced that my son Ridley was lying. Given the circumstances, there was no doubt about it. I could forgive a lot, but not telling his wife about Brian's death and asking her for money was unforgivable. I had to make Ridley reflect on his actions. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what to say to Brian in heaven. I made up my mind and approached Emily with a proposal.
Listen, we're going to gather evidence of Ridley's wrongdoing together. We'll make sure he can't make any excuses. Then, we'll confront him with it.
My name is Lynn. After graduating from nursing school, I started working at a state public hospital. The job was tough, but it's where I had a fateful encounter with Brian. He initially came to my hospital as a patient, and I was assigned to be his nurse. During his care, he shared many stories with me. I was somewhat intrigued by him, so I often engaged in our conversations. The conversations we shared during those tough days at work became my greatest joy. And then, when he was about to be discharged, he gave me his contact information. Let's get in touch if you'd like. I didn't hesitate to contact him immediately. And so, we started dating officially. I later learned that he had fallen for me at first sight, and was desperately trying to get my attention by striking up conversations. I came to deeply love him for that. Our relationship continued without any major fights because he was such a kind person. And eventually, we got married. Even after marriage, my relationship with Brian was just fine. And a few years later, our son Ridley was born. From that time, Brian became busy with work and was rarely at home. But when the family was together, we would happily go out to eat or travel. Several more years passed, and Ridley went on to college. His college was quite far from home, reachable only by airplane. I felt a sense of vulnerability sending my son so far away, but convinced myself it was for his future. Ridley would come home during long holidays, and he seemed even brighter than before, which reassured me. However, being a STEM college, the expenses seemed to be quite high. Ridley often asked me to send him money. "Mom, I'm sorry, but I'm short on money this month. Can you send me some?"
Didn't I just send you some recently? What are you spending all this money on?
It's for school stuff. The books they require us to buy are all specialized and really expensive. Plus, the equipment and materials for research cost quite a bit too. Ridley pleaded desperately. And there's also living expenses. It's really tough, even with a part-time job. I can't keep up. Ridley said, sounding almost on the verge of tears. Hearing his voice made my heart ache. I wondered how anxious Ridley must be, living so far from home. Our own financial situation wasn't easy, but I felt compelled to help no matter what.
Okay, I understand. I'll send it by the end of this week, so don't worry. Thank you, Mom.
Ridley's voice brightened up upon hearing my response, filling me with an indescribable joy. This exchange continued until Ridley graduated from college. After graduation, Ridley successfully found a job in a company in the city. I wished he could come back to his hometown, but it couldn't be helped. The university was a plane ride away, but now he was just a long train ride away. It was somewhat closer, so I had to be content with that. However, Ridley became busier with work and visited home even less.
Ridley, when will you come home next? Let me know when you decided.
Sorry, Mom. Work's been so hectic, I don't see myself coming home anytime soon. It's like I hardly have any days off, and sometimes my boss calls me in unexpectedly. So, I really can't afford to come home.
It sounds tough. It's good to work hard, but don't overdo it. If you break down, it's all for nothing. Make sure to reach out if things get too hard. Yeah, I got it. Thanks.
Ridley said this and quickly hung up the phone. His somewhat indifferent attitude pained me. But I told myself it couldn't be helped. Ridley was a grown adult, after all. It was probably overbearing for me to say too much now. I tried to suppress my loneliness and convinced myself of this. I also made a point not to call Ridley. I didn't want to interrupt his work. For a while, we didn't communicate. But then, one day, Ridley called me out of the blue.
Lynn, it's been a while. Is now a good time? It's fine. What's going on? Well, I've decided to get married. What? What do you mean? I happened to meet someone and we got along well. So, we decided to get married. I've already met her parents. We'll be coming home soon to introduce her to you. I see. I'll be looking forward to it.
I said this and hung up the phone. Ridley was getting married. And just the thought made my heart flutter. I wondered what kind of woman she could be. Would I be able to see my grandchildren? All sorts of thoughts raced through my mind. I was so happy that I marked the calendar with a big sign. And then the day finally came. Ridley's girlfriend, named Emily, was a quiet, beautiful, and kind-hearted woman with a sharp mind. I liked her immediately. She seemed perfect for Ridley. There was no reason to oppose their marriage, and things moved quickly. Ridley and Emily were soon happily married. After the wedding, Emily would help me with my work whenever Ridley was home. It seemed that Emily thought highly of me too, and there was no sign of any mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict. However, as time passed, Ridley became busier and had almost no time to come home. Even though we would occasionally talk on the phone, those calls became rare. I was lonely, but I guessed young people preferred spending time with each other. Out of consideration for Ridley and his wife, I decided not to call unless it was an emergency. After that, we hardly communicated. There was no interaction after they called to wish me a happy birthday, and time passed by. But a year later, Emily suddenly called. "Lynn, it's been a while." Emily spoke in a heavy, somber tone. I was concerned by her demeanor, but chose not to press the issue. "Oh, Emily, it's been a while. How's Ridley doing?" "Yes, he's fine. But there's something I just have to tell you." "Something you have to say? What happened?" Emily seemed to hesitate for a moment, taking a deep breath. But then, as if she had made up her mind, she began to speak earnestly. "I'm sorry, but I just can't do it anymore. I can't afford to pay $3,000 every month for Brian's care. It's just too much for me." Emily said this through tears. I couldn't grasp what Emily was saying. $3,000 a month for care? What are you talking about? Please don't joke about this. But how can there be care expenses? Brian passed away 8 years ago. You should know that, shouldn't you? What? But Ridley told me we needed money for care. I haven't heard anything about him passing away. What's going on here? I'm completely lost. Emily seemed genuinely unaware. I was having trouble understanding the situation myself. But there's no denying the fact that Brian has passed away. Listen, Emily, Brian passed away 8 years ago due to his illness worsening. He was indeed in need of care before that. I said this carefully, trying not to upset Emily. I did tell Ridley about how tough Brian's care was. But I never asked for money. I can't believe it. I wasn't told anything about his passing. It's true. Emily pleaded desperately. I was convinced she wasn't lying, based on her behavior up to now. I knew she wasn't the type to say such things. I recalled the time when Brian passed away and explained it to Emily in as much detail as possible. When Brian was critically ill, and it was clear he was in danger, I contacted Ridley. He came home then. Emily gasped over the phone. She might not have known even that. But you didn't come. I heard you were busy with an overseas business trip and couldn't possibly come back here. I said, feeling a pang in my heart. But at that time, I was so preoccupied with Brian that I didn't have the capacity to consider Emily's situation. Overseas business trip? I'm an office worker. I don't go on trips abroad. In fact, I've never been on a business trip. Emily exclaimed, seemingly shocked. Why would Ridley say such a thing? Where did all the care money I've been paying go? Emily was clearly shaken over the phone. But after a while, she began to explain the situation slowly. This started about 6 months ago. Ridley came to me saying we needed money for Brian's care. He mentioned how our parents sent us money during our student days, and now it was his turn to send money. Hearing Emily's frail voice, I felt an unprecedented wave of anger. So, I initially paid willingly. But the amount kept increasing, and now it's $3,000 a month. Emily sighed deeply after saying that. And I could easily imagine how much she had been struggling. I've been dipping into my savings to make the payments, but honestly, I've reached my limit. That's why I called. Hearing Emily's words, I was convinced that Ridley was lying. The situation made it clear. Forgiving minor things is one thing, but not telling his wife about Brian's death and asking for money is unforgivable. If this demand escalates, it could even lead to a criminal case. I must make Ridley reflect on his actions. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what to say to Brian in heaven. I resolved to do something and approached Emily with a suggestion.
Emily, I believe you. It's clear Ridley is lying.
Is that so? I was foolish. If only I had spoken to you sooner, this wouldn't have happened.
No, it's not your fault. But we can't let this go. Listen, let's gather evidence of Ridley's wrongdoing together. We'll collect enough so he can't make any excuses, and then we'll confront him with it.
Understood. What should I do?
Well, Emily, I'd like you to gather any evidence you can find at home. Do you have a study or something? There should be receipts and documents there. I'll hire a detective agency to investigate Ridley's background. There's probably more to this.
Got it. I'll carefully collect evidence without being noticed and look through messages to see if there's any information about Ridley. I'll contact you if I find anything.
Emily said this and then hung up the phone.
At first, she was unsettled, but now there wasn't a trace of that to be seen. With that attitude, he's bound to thoroughly search for evidence. I started looking online for a detective agency and immediately requested an investigation into Ridley's background. Several weeks later, I visited Ridley's house. I had asked Emily about Ridley's day off in advance. Guided by Emily, I headed towards the living room. Unaware of anything, Ridley was relaxing in the living room. He was surprised to see me enter.
What? Mom, what brings you here all of a sudden? You could have let me know you were coming.
Sorry for not telling you in advance. I just needed to talk to you about something.
I see. But I have to step out for a bit. Emily will fill you in on the details.
It seemed Ridley sensed something was off. He suddenly got up in a hurry, looking to leave the scene.
Sit down,
I yelled at Ridley. He looked surprised and flustered. Emily, with a blank expression, went over to Ridley and made him sit on the sofa. Ridley looked back and forth between me and Emily, his face clearly showing his distress.
You know, Ridley, I got a call from Emily the other day. She told me you've been making her pay $3,000 a month for Brian's care expenses.
Upon hearing this, Ridley's expression twisted, and he bit his lip, realizing his actions had been discovered.
But that's strange, isn't it? Because Brian is no longer with us. So, who exactly are these care expenses for? I'd like to hear it from you.
Ridley didn't answer right away. He looked down and scratched his head.
Not going to answer? Then let's change the question. Emily didn't know that Brian had passed away.
Emily looked down at Ridley with cold eyes.
You said she couldn't come because she was on a business trip abroad, right? But Emily has never been on a business trip, let alone abroad. What do you have to say about that?
Ridley remained silent, still looking down.
Say something,
I shouted even louder than before. I was furious at Ridley for choosing to remain silent at such a time. Emily's lips were pressed tightly together as she glared at Ridley. Ridley sighed deeply and rubbed his face with his hands. Listen, we already know you've been lying. We've gathered plenty of evidence to prove it. So, staying silent now is pointless. I said this in a more admonishing tone. Scolding him wouldn't make him reflect. I wanted him to understand why what he did was wrong. Now, about the $3,000 you conned out of Emily. What did you use it for? Tell me the truth. Ridley was silent for a while, but eventually, he began to speak weakly. I wanted to use that money to start a business. My current job is so tough. I thought starting my own business would increase my income and allow me to work more freely. Ridley murmured, clearly shaken. I wanted to immediately rebut, but I decided to let him finish speaking first. I know I did something wrong to you guys. But I thought you'd be against it if I told you the truth, so I couldn't bring myself to say it. I'm really sorry. After saying this, Ridley got up from the sofa and apologized. Well, I appreciate your honesty. Look at me, I said gently. Ridley, seemingly relieved, looked up, but he was met with documents and photos I dropped in front of him. They were the detective's report and documents Emily had found at home. Upon seeing them, Ridley's face turned pale. It seems you've been borrowing money from various places since your college days. And despite that, you've been splurging on girls at bars. You've been living quite lavishly, haven't you? And that's not all. You even took out loans in my name. Emily said this and shoved the documents in Ridley's face. I had no idea about any of this. You're dissatisfied with just $3,000 a month? Am I just someone convenient for you to get money from? Say something. Emily seemed to have reached her limit, grabbing Ridley by the collar in frustration. Enough, Ridley. As I said earlier, we know all about your lies, and we have all the evidence we need. I stopped Emily and explained again to Ridley, who, frightened by Emily's scolding, listened quietly. We know how you've been spending your money and what your personal life is like. There's no use hiding anything now. Ridley groaned softly, ruffling his hair. But I continued undeterred. We want to hear everything from you. Understand? So, start talking. This time, Ridley seemed genuinely remorseful. He began to speak through tears. I'm sorry, truly sorry. It was all a lie. Tears fell from Ridley's eyes, forming puddles on the floor. Back in college, I asked for money not for textbooks, but because I wanted money to have fun. I didn't have a part-time job. I spent all the money on shopping and hanging out with friends. Hearing Ridley finally tell the truth brought me some relief. And what about after you started working? After I started working, I went to bars after work. I took a liking to one of the girls there and ended up spending a lot of money on her. If I didn't, she wouldn't pay me any attention. But you've been spending more than you earn, haven't you? How did you manage that? By the time I realized I couldn't borrow money in my name anymore. But I still had to pay back my debts. So, I started borrowing money in Emily's name. I secretly took her ID and completed the procedures online. Emily looked like she wanted to say something upon hearing this. But I gestured for her to wait. I had decided we would only interject after he had confessed everything. I had no other choice. But when that wasn't an option anymore, I lied about needing money for care expenses to get it from Emily. I'm really sorry. Ridley broke down in tears like a child after saying this. But the ones who truly deserved to cry were Emily and me. I exchanged a look with Emily and sighed deeply. Emily seemed to have lost the will to scold him any further at the sight of Ridley's pathetic state. After sobbing for a while, Ridley apologized again. "I'm truly sorry. I deeply regret my actions and promise I won't do it again. I swear it right here. I'll definitely pay back the money. Please forgive me." Ridley apologized sincerely. But his words were hard to trust. He had been deceiving those close to him for so long. Even if we forgave him, it was almost certain he would just repeat his actions. "Ridley, it's over. We can't trust anything you say. We never intended to forgive you. And this isn't the end. Be prepared." An hour later, the doorbell of the house rang. Emily went to answer it. Ridley watched her apprehensively. Led in by Emily, the newcomers were women. Upon seeing their faces, Ridley caught his breath. "You recognize these women, Ridley? They're your ex-girlfriends. Don't pretend you've forgotten. You've been living off these women, haven't you?" Emily glared at Ridley as she spoke coldly. "Why? Why are all of you here?" "We found out you were living off these women thanks to Lynn's investigation. So I reached out to them, saying I wanted to apologize from the bottom of my heart." Upon seeing their faces, Ridley caught his breath. Despair appeared in Ridley's eyes. Then, word spread. "Thanks to that, your ex-girlfriends have come together, wanting to support me. Please, express all the feelings you've been holding inside." Emily's words were the signal for the start. One by one, Ridley's ex-girlfriends began to reveal his misdeeds. Ridley's face turned red from the overwhelming revelations, enduring the embarrassment. I, too, felt a deep sense of shame listening to it all, wondering where I went wrong in raising my son, and how he ended up in this situation. The exposure made me wish I could disappear from the sheer embarrassment. After the revelations, Emily placed divorce papers on the table. "Ridley, I can't live with you anymore. Please sign these divorce papers right now. And write a promissory note to pay compensation and repay the loans you took out in my name." "No, please, Emily, let's be rational about this. This isn't right. I'll truly change, so please reconsider. I'd be lost without you right now." Ridley pleaded pitifully, but his ex-girlfriends unanimously scolded him to get real. Not a single person in the room was on Ridley's side. Reluctantly, Ridley signed the divorce papers and wrote a promissory note and affidavit complying with Emily's demands. Afterward, Ridley, now in tears, turned to me, begging for help. "Mom, I'm really sorry. This is my last selfish request. Please help me with the repayments. I know I've done wrong by lying, but I can't do this alone. Please." "Lynn, you don't need to help him. Just leave him be." I looked into Ridley's eyes, reminiscing about the warmth of holding him for the first time. The warmth of holding Ridley for the first time, the joyful days spent with Brian and the three of us, the sense of vulnerability when sending Ridley off to college. It all comes back to me as if it were just yesterday. Despite his faults, he was still my son. "All right, Ridley. No matter what you've done, you're my irreplaceable son." Ridley's eyes lit up with joy at my words. "I don't believe I'm entirely blameless. Perhaps I made you feel lonely without realizing it." I was overwhelmed with remorse towards Ridley. "So, I'll take responsibility too. I promise to take care of you until the end." "Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much." Ridley held my hands, apologizing through his tears. Just then, the doorbell rang again, and Emily went to answer it. Several well-dressed, stout men entered the living room. "Good afternoon," We are here following a request. Is this gentleman Ridley? One of the men confirmed in a low voice. Yes, that's him. We've finished our discussion, so please take him now. Understood. The men briefly responded, then lifted Ridley by his arms and made him stand. Caught off guard, Ridley screamed and resisted, but he was no match for the men's strength.
Mom, who are these people? What do you mean they're taking me? Stop. Let me go.
I do want to help you get back on your feet, but I'm getting older and that's becoming difficult. So, I consulted with the detective agency, and they recommended a good rehabilitation facility. I paused there. My heart was aching as if it were being torn apart. Ridley looked at me with tears in his eyes. With determination, I met his gaze and declared, "You're going there to be re-educated and fix your rotten self. This is my final act of sympathy for you."
This can't be happening. Let me go. Please, Emily, anyone, help me.
Ridley desperately pleaded for help, but Emily and his ex-girlfriends remained unmoved, watching him with cold eyes. It's a safe place, not dangerous. You'll just have your daily life and work managed while living there. If you truly are sorry, you'll follow their guidance, won't you?
No, I don't want this. I swear, I really won't do anything bad again. Please help me.
Ridley struggled as he was taken away. That's when I finally shed tears. I didn't want to do this. But the issue was too significant. If not rehabilitated now, Ridley could bring misery not only upon himself, but also upon many others. I'm so sorry, Ridley. I apologized from the bottom of my heart. Emily came over and comforted me. There were tears in her eyes as well. Sending Ridley to the facility resolved everything for the moment. The debts Ridley had accumulated on his own would now be his responsibility to repay. So far, he has been making regular monthly payments into Emily's account without issue, as the total amount was too large for a lump sum payment. It will undoubtedly take a long time before Ridley has repaid everything. This is all a matter of personal responsibility. I've been able to keep up with Ridley's situation through occasional updates from the facility staff. Initially, it seems Ridley attempted to escape whenever he saw an opportunity. However, the dedicated efforts of the facility's staff in educating him have led to him now leading a quiet life, following the daily routine. I can only hope that he truly reforms from the bottom of his heart. Emily has been living alone since then. Fortunately, her salary is sufficient, so she doesn't seem to be struggling financially. I deeply regret what happened and feel truly sorry for Emily. She might have faced significant life disruptions due to debts she had no part in. Just thinking about it makes me feel like I can never apologize enough to Emily. However, Emily doesn't seem to hold anything against me. In her view, Ridley is the one at fault, not me. Moreover, Emily still visits my home every few months, mainly for sightseeing purposes. The main focus, it seems, is on tourism. Every time they visit, they bring various gifts, share stories, and help with household chores. Even though our official in-law relationship has ended, our bond feels closer than ever. After Brian's passing and sending Ridley to the facility, Emily's visits have become a significant source of joy for me. Now, I look forward to her visits and live a peaceful life on my own.
Look, that's my friend's dad.
This happened when I attended my beloved niece Gloria's Parents' Day. I was shocked to see a couple walking into the classroom. Because the man, cozying up to a woman I didn't recognize, was my own husband, Mike. After talking to Gloria, everything clicked for me. So, that's what it was all about. I'll never forgive this. As Mike was about to leave the classroom, I blocked his way, putting on a smile. Let's continue to get along as families, shall we? Please, stay with us until the end to see the turmoil that unfolds from here. My name is Emily, I'm 33 years old, and we're a dual-income couple in our 5th year of marriage. My husband's name is Mike. We met in a sort of half-set-up situation. My parents, who I met later in life, became good friends with Mike's parents, and we first met at a family dinner we were all invited to. Mike made the first move, and that's how our dating began. After a year and a half of dating, when we decided to marry, both sets of parents were thrilled. Everyone around us congratulated us, saying we were a perfect match. At that time, my close sister Flora also attended from afar, bringing along her then 1-year-old daughter Gloria, and I remember feeling so happy. 5 years later, I was still living with Mike, busy with work. Mike would say he's busy with work, coming home late on weekdays, and increasingly, his precious weekends were spent working. With Mike off and away, I found myself spending more time alone. I wish we had kids. That thought crossed my mind, and I shook it off. Actually, not long after we got married, Mike dropped a bombshell on me. I, actually, can't have children. The hospital test results he showed me clearly stated that. Since when did you know? I knew before we got married. But I thought if I told you, you might not marry me. Please, Emily, I don't want our parents to know about this. Keep it a secret. Mike had always said he loved kids and wanted a daughter someday. Knowing that, I felt deeply sorry for him at that moment. We'll take care of each other instead of having kids. Let's live our lives together. With those words from Mike, I nodded and resigned myself to giving up on the idea of having children. Now, 5 years later, did Mike keep his word? No, he didn't. Saying he's busy and tired, leaving all the household chores to me despite being a dual-income couple, without ever showing appreciation, his attitude towards me turned increasingly cold. One day, I got a call from Flora. She had moved abroad with her husband right after our wedding, but now that his assignment was over, they were moving back, not too far from us. Gloria was now 6 years old. I had seen her in photos, but this would be our first real interaction since the wedding. I was looking forward to meeting Flora and Gloria again. That night, I tried to tell Mike, who came home late, about Flora's return. Welcome back, Mike. You know, I got a call from Flora today. I'm tired. I don't have time for small talk. Mike looked down at me coldly and quickly went to the bathroom. Left alone, I stood there, feeling lonely. Despite his aloof attitude towards me, Mike left all the troublesome matters for me to handle. Hey, we're going to have a birthday party for Mom. Dad asked me to prepare, so you take care of it. I was left puzzled when he unilaterally said that, but I went ahead and prepared for my mother-in-law, Helen's birthday party, squeezing it into my busy schedule. On the day of the birthday party, Mike, who attended, wore a proud smile as he saw Helen's joy. This birthday party, I set it all up. All for my dear Mom. Dad, I did good, right? Despite the fact that he had dumped everything on me, Mike had the audacity to claim the credit, which irked me a bit. However, after the birthday party was over, my father-in-law Nicholas and Helen thanked me. We know it was Emily who prepared everything. Thanks for doing this for Helen. Please continue to take good care of Mike. They were as kind to me as they had been since the day we got married. Despite my growing grievances with Mike, I was grateful for having met Nicholas and Helen. Sometime later, Mike's arrogant behavior only escalated. He wouldn't have a proper conversation with me, yet he always found something to complain about regarding the housework. One morning, an incident occurred.
Hey, Emily! What were you thinking?
Mike yelled at me, his face contorted with anger as I was getting ready to leave for work. What's wrong with you all of a sudden?
You didn't polish my shoes. How am I supposed to go to work like this?
Indeed, Mike had come home after I had gone to bed the previous night, so I hadn't polished his shoes. But, fed up with the mounting stress, I retorted.
They're your shoes. Why don't you take care of them yourself? Stop expecting me to do everything.
In the next moment, I felt a sharp pain on my cheek. It took a second to realize Mike had slapped me.
Mike, did you just hit me? Shut up. There's nothing wrong with disciplining my wife. If you don't want this to happen, do your job as a wife properly.
With that, Mike stormed out of the house. I was left clutching my cheek, collapsing onto the floor.
He's hardly home, acts cold, and now violence. This is too much.
That's when I began to question the meaning of my marriage to Mike. Yet, considering how happy our parents were when we married, and how kind Nicholas and Helen have been to me, I couldn't easily decide to divorce. One day, not long after she had returned from abroad, Flora asked, "Would you come to my daughter's Parents' Day?" Only 2 family members could attend, and Flora's husband couldn't make it because of work. I happily agreed, saying,
"I'll be there."
On the day of the Parents' Day, I went with Flora to Gloria's classroom. We waved back at Gloria, who was happily waving at us. Soon, the lesson started, and I watched from the back corner of the classroom. Then, a couple entered the classroom late. I was shocked when I glanced at them, because the dad was unmistakably Mike. He was there with a blonde woman, dressed flamboyantly, whispering and looking cozy as they started watching the class. I told Flora, and both of us, surprised, tried to stay out of sight from Mike for the time being. At that moment, I discreetly sent a message to someone. As the Parents' Day came to a close, the children started making their way over to their parents. Gloria ran over to Flora, and I bent down to ask her, "Do you know that man over there?"
That's Irene's dad. I saw his picture at their house when we went over to play.
Gloria had been abroad for so long that she didn't remember Mike's face since the wedding when she was 1. At that moment, I understood everything. So that's what it was. I will never forgive this. As Mike, the woman, and a child named Irene were about to leave the classroom, I blocked their path, forcing a smile in front of the child.
"Hello. I hear Gloria has been getting along well with you. Thank you for that."
Mike looked at me, his face freezing over. The woman casually replied, "Hello.
Since the kids get along so well, let's all continue to be friendly, shall we? Family style."
Huh. Beside the puzzled woman, Mike started to tremble. Then Flora said, "Since the 2 want to play together, we'll take Irene with us," and quickly whispered something to me as she was leaving. As Flora and the children walked away, it left me, Mike, and the woman. "Come on, Mike, let's go," Johanna said. Yes, excuse us," Mike responded, trying to act like a stranger. I grabbed Mike's arm with a smile, still.
"Huh? What are you doing with my husband? And who are you?"
I then introduced myself with a serious face. "Sorry for the late introduction. I'm Emily. His wife, you know?" The woman's face turned pale as she realized the situation. They tried to dash away. But having been in track and field during my school days, I easily caught up and stopped them. At the school gate, Mike gasped.
"What? Dad, Mom too?"
Yes, the person I emailed during Parents' Day was Nicholas. I had sent him a message asking him to come quickly to Gloria's school. Seeing Nicholas and Helen, Mike gave up trying to escape and collapsed. Nicholas, Helen, and I put Mike and the woman in the car and headed to the in-laws' house. In the living room of the in-laws' house, with the 2 seated side by side, I confronted them. "So, why were you at Parents' Day?"
It was nothing. She's just an acquaintance. A single mother who asked me to act as a father figure, nothing more."
"But Gloria mentioned there are family photos of you at her house. Do you usually take family photos with just acquaintances? You don't need to lie so blatantly." Mike, resigning himself, began to explain. The woman's name was Johanna. He had been involved with her before we met. Johanna worked at a night bar, and thinking Nicholas and Helen wouldn't approve, he kept it hidden. After introducing me to his parents, he broke off the relationship with Johanna. But right after we got engaged, Johanna contacted him saying, "I gave birth to your child." After seeing Irene, I couldn't help but go back to Johanna. I found her so adorable. That's when I asked something that had been bothering me. "You can't have children, right? That medical report was real, wasn't it?"
That's because...
Mike began to reveal something shocking. Right before our marriage, Johanna had told him, "Don't have children with anyone but this child." And so, Mike had gone through with a vasectomy.
For such a selfish reason, you made me give up on having children. Do you understand how I felt?
Johanna laughed at my angry reproach. "Shut up, loser. Mike loves me."
You are just a pity marriage.
When I asked,
"Is that true, Mike?"
he nodded. I married Mike because Nicholas and Helen liked me, and our parents got along well. I was efficient, took care of the house and personal matters perfectly. So he only ever saw me as a maid.
So, a maid, huh? But now that it's out, there's no helping it.
I'll divorce you.
I have a woman I love and a lovely daughter.
You're no longer needed. That's when Nicholas, who had been silent until now, spoke up.
Did you forget why Emily's parents and we got along so well?
Huh? The truth was, both our parents owned businesses and were in a cooperative relationship. Currently, Nicholas's company's most important client was the company where I now serve as a department head, owned by my parents.
You might not know since you were sent to work at a friend's company for training, but if we lose the business with Emily's company, we won't survive.
It was then revealed that Nicholas had always told Mike, "You'll take over someday, so keep up with the company's affairs." But Mike, not taking it seriously, was unaware that my parents' company was the most crucial client.
So, I intended to leave the company to you, but now there may not be a company to inherit. More importantly, we're disowning you. I never want to see the face of such a foolish son again.
As Nicholas declared disownment, Mike started to panic, begging Nicholas and Helen. But Nicholas and Helen firmly refused him. At that moment, I received an email on my mobile phone. Checking it, I smirked. "So, Johanna,
how's Irene's real dad doing?"
"Huh?" I confronted them with a photo of Johanna, heavily pregnant and looking cozy in a childbirth class with a brown-haired man unknown to me.
You seemed quite close to this man during your pregnancy. Where did he go? How do you have that?
I explained that when Flora took the children away, I had asked her to gather any information she could on this woman. Flora, using her network of mom friends, managed to get this photo. According to her mom friend,
this man used to accompany her to every prenatal checkup. I thought he was the new husband Mike knew about.
Hearing this, Johanna's face grew paler and paler. Mike was visibly shaken by the photo. No wonder, since the man in the picture and Irene looked remarkably alike.
Hey, Johanna! What's going on? This man looks exactly like Irene.
When I pressed her to tell the truth, Johanna seemed to resign herself and began to speak. She admitted to two-timing while with Mike, and said that she got pregnant right after they broke up, but after the child was born, they had a big fight, and he left. She thought it would be best to claim the child was Mike's, the prospective company president's, to monopolize Nicholas's inheritance, so she convinced Mike to have a vasectomy.
You're kidding! I believed in you and became incapable of having kids.
Mike shook Johanna's shoulders in disbelief, but she just turned pale and said nothing. Then Mike approached me.
I'm sorry, Emily. I was deceived by this woman. You said you'd stay with me even if we couldn't have kids. Let's start over. I only love you.
Huh?
Didn't you just say I was no longer needed? Who's the maid?
Mike was at a loss for words, so I declared,
We're getting a divorce. And I'll be suing both of you for adultery, so be prepared.
As Mike broke down crying, I told him,
Never show your face to me again.
I left Mike and Johanna to their ugly argument and walked away. Eventually, my divorce from Mike was finalized. I received $40,000 in alimony from Mike and $20,000 from Johanna. Nicholas and Helen, having disowned Mike and deeply apologized, persuaded my parents to continue the business dealings. They informed the president of the company Mike was supposed to inherit that they were leaving Mike's fate in their hands. Consequently, Mike, who had never been serious at work, was fired. Johanna moved away with her child and returned to night work, likely struggling with debts incurred from paying me alimony. After separating from Johanna and depleting his savings, jobless Mike lived alone in a showerless apartment, desperately job hunting. As for me, 3 years after leaving Mike, I remarried a sincere man I met through work, who treats me kindly, and we were blessed with the child I had always wished for. We're now looking forward to meeting our baby, enjoying each day happily. Can you lend me some money to go to the hospital? In the middle of the night, 8-year-old Owen came to our house. Moreover, he was limping in pain. It's over an hour's walk for an adult to our place. What on earth happened? Looking closer, various parts of his body were scraped, and he was bleeding. Exhausted and in pain, Owen's eyes were vacant, as if he might collapse at any moment.
Absolutely not!
My husband shouted at the innocent child. He was very angry and went somewhere. And then, I was shaken to my core by my husband's unexpected action. I am Kate, 60 years old. I lived with my husband, Raymond. Our son and his wife lived in the next town, about an hour's walk from our house, making a car essential for travel. Phil's wife, Linda, is 6 years younger than him, and they have an 8-year-old grandson, Owen. Until now, Phil often brought Owen to our house, so I had been taking care of Owen since he was a baby. On the other hand, Linda rarely came over and had told Phil, "Bring him here." However, it seems Linda has been devoted to housework and childcare, wanting to make some free time for her from now on. Moreover, Phil said, Linda is very domestic and takes good care of us, satisfied with their current family situation. There's no way to intervene, even as a mom. I told myself, letting them do as they wished. But I had no idea such a tragedy would strike us later. It was when Phil was promoted and decided to work abroad half a year ago. Phil, who hates being away from his family, wanted to leave Japan with his family. However, Linda objected. I told myself, letting them do as they wished. But I had no idea such a tragedy would strike us later. It was when Phil was promoted and decided to work abroad half a year ago. Phil, who hates being away from his family, wanted to leave Japan with his family. However, Linda objected.
Owen has just started elementary school and has friends. It's cruel to make him transfer.
Of course, Phil tried to persuade her. But Linda insisted, and with a heavy heart, he left for abroad alone. And sadly, at the same time, Owen stopped coming to our house. I have repeatedly asked Linda to let Owen visit, but each time she made up excuses to refuse. Still not giving up, I pleaded over the phone just to see him for a moment. Then Linda, raising her voice, ranted at me.
It's hard enough without Phil. I can't stand having to worry about you too. Are you trying to monitor me?
No, that's not it at all. Just a short time at the doorstep, I just want to see Owen's face.
Don't you understand I don't want that? If you keep pestering me, I'll tell Phil and have him scold you.
After saying that, Linda abruptly hung up. Sigh, it seems like nothing will help. Maybe that's just how a son's wife is. Phil had emailed me that his new job was demanding, cutting into his sleep time. Not wanting to cause Phil any more worry, I decided to wait to see Owen until Phil returned home. And before I knew it, more than half a year had passed since I last saw Owen. Raymond and I, missing seeing Owen's face, looked at his photos every day to distract ourselves. Raymond's favorite was a group photo from Owen's entrance ceremony. According to Raymond, Owen's anxious face was adorable. One evening, just as the clock struck 9 p.m., the sound of the house doorbell rang suddenly, so I opened the front door. Can you lend me some money to go to the hospital? What a surprise, 8-year-old Owen had come.
What happened to you?
My leg hurts, and I can't sleep at night, so I decided to go to the hospital myself. But this is all I have. When Owen slowly opened his palm, there were 3 dimes. Apparently, he had walked here, dragging his leg in pain, for over an hour. I fell on the way, said Owen, whose knees were scraped and bleeding. But no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't understand. I decided to slowly listen to his story and invited Owen into the house for now. Then, at that moment, Raymond, who had been silent until then, suddenly spoke up.
Absolutely not. What are you saying? Are you out of your mind? Owen is in so much trouble.
Angry at Raymond's cold attitude, I grabbed his sweater with both hands and shook him. However, Raymond pulled my hands away with great force and, with a face like a demon, left the house without saying anything. It's because I came. I'm sorry. I'll go home now. Owen, completely shrunken, turned his back on me and reached for the doorknob. Owen, don't worry about Grandpa. I'll take you to the hospital myself, so no need to worry. I immediately called an ambulance and at the same time, I called Linda. But I couldn't get through to her, and my texts weren't even read. 20 minutes later, while all this was happening, the paramedics finally arrived. Owen was taken to a nearby hospital, and I accompanied him. Afterwards, Owen was diagnosed with a fracture by the doctor. He was treated and instructed to rest at home. What is Linda doing at a time like this? Even at this point, I couldn't get in touch with Linda, so I decided to take Owen back to our house. Would you like something warm to drink? You used to like tea with honey, didn't you? I'll prepare it now, so please sit in that chair and wait. As soon as we arrived home, I filled the kettle with water and turned on the stove. Then, Owen suddenly came close to me. Oh dear, you should be sitting still. It's not that, Grandma. You see. At this moment, I was told an astonishing truth by Owen. Owen, having confessed everything, had big tears in his eyes. So that's what happened. It must have been hard for you. But you can rest easy now. I hugged him gently, as if wrapping him in warmth. And then, I was informed of a certain event by an unexpected person.
Those who made Owen go through this will not get away with it.
A flame of revenge ignited within me. The next day at noon. Finally, Linda answered the phone. Owen has fractured his leg and was seen at the hospital. Now, he's at our place. Apparently, resting at home and eating nutritious food will help him heal faster. Then, Kate, please continue to take care of Owen for a while. You must be happy to be able to look after Owen so much since you haven't been able to see him until now, right? I just said, understood, and hung up. I had no intention of sending Owen back to that house. Even if Linda had said, I'm coming to pick up the child now, I planned to keep Owen with me by any means, so Linda's response was exactly what I wanted. However, I felt anger at her attitude as a mother. But I didn't want to get unnecessarily confrontational and spoil the plan. In the meantime, as I supported Owen, I ran around preparing for retaliation, and finally, everything was ready. All right, watch out. Today, right here, I'll bring you down. A week after Owen came to stay with us, I left him at home to look after himself for a bit while I, accompanied by someone, made a surprise visit to Linda's place.
What is this about? Showing up out of the blue. Please, just go home.
I had gotten a key to their house from Owen. Ignoring Linda's protests, I began to look around the room. Was someone here just before we arrived? I noticed that, although the room was generally tidy, the sheets on the bed in the bedroom were unusually disheveled.
Enough of this. I'll call the police if I have to.
Oh, Linda, you really think you're in any position to say that? I've heard everything from Owen. Leaving him all alone while you're out at night, I see. He was told not to tell anyone. What Owen had tearfully told me before was about this very issue. According to him, one day, Feeling lonely and scared because he was sick, he tried to stop Linda from going out at night by standing in the doorway with his arms outstretched.
But you just pushed him aside and left anyway. He hurt his ankle when he fell.
Linda always told Owen.
Don't you dare tell Dad or anyone about what happens at home, or you'll go without food.
But that day, unable to bear the pain any longer, Owen thought, maybe Grandpa and Grandma can help somehow. So, relying on his memory, he limped all the way to our house.
If you have money for luxury brands, you should at least take Owen to the hospital.
When I opened the closet, it was packed with obviously expensive bags and clothes. Owen had confided in me.
Mom always has nice clothes and bags, but she doesn't care about me.
It was clear Linda's possessions were all high-end and flashy.
The loneliness without Phil, you're trying to fill it with shopping. That's also on your son, you know.
Linda, veins throbbing with anger, pointed her finger at me. Then, suddenly, a low voice boomed from behind me.
Shut up! I've seen the affair with my own eyes.
The voice belonged unmistakably to Raymond. He had stormed Linda's home with me. That day Owen came to us seeking help.
Not lending it!
Raymond had shouted before storming off, leaving me initially infuriated. However, his anger was actually directed at Linda. Overwhelmed by fury, he had blurted out without thinking. Raymond had headed straight for Linda's house after leaving ours.
I saw you getting into a car driven by a man at that very moment. And I knew he was Owen's first-grade teacher.
Raymond had memorized the face of the teacher who had been in charge of Owen's class from looking at the school photo every day. After Owen revealed the truth to us, we were informed about Linda's secret rendezvous with Owen's former teacher.
I heard from the affair partner that you always dressed provocatively for parent-teacher meetings and aggressively flirted with him.
I confronted the former teacher based on Raymond's testimony. The affair partner admitted that despite knowing it was wrong, he gave in to Linda's temptations when Owen moved to a different class. The former teacher expressed remorse and readily agreed to pay the compensation. He had already submitted his resignation and promised never to see Linda again, planning to return to his hometown.
You stayed in Japan because you couldn't bear to part with him, under the guise of for the child's sake, didn't you? Well, that's...
Linda faltered, caught off guard. I assumed that she hadn't taken Owen to the hospital after pushing him because she feared being discovered. And perhaps she thought Phil would cut her allowance if he found out, which is why she didn't take Owen to the hospital. Then, likely because I had accurately pinpointed the truth. Linda couldn't hide her agitation. However, after a brief pause, she defiantly claimed,
If I beg Phil, he'll surely forgive me.
Haha, he really loves me.
Linda, enough is enough. Phil, when did you get back?
Phil, having been informed by me, had hurried back to verify the truth with his own eyes. Believing Linda wouldn't show her true self in his presence, he secretly observed everything from the shadows.
I've heard it all. I can't forgive you. Your behavior towards Dad and Mom is too appalling. I want a divorce. Wait a minute. It was just a lapse in judgment. Plus, Owen is only 8. He needs his mom. I just visited Owen at the hospital, and he's made it clear he doesn't need a mom like you.
Even after receiving such a decisive blow from Phil, Linda desperately begged for reconciliation. But Phil steadfastly refused. Linda then turned to me with a fierce look, baring her teeth.
You've made him leave me because of your meddling. How do you plan to take responsibility for this? That's on you. Besides, I heard you've always seen Phil as nothing but an ATM.
I had been sniffing around Linda, checking if she had any secrets by going through the wedding guest list and making calls.
And I'll be sure to inform your parents about all of this, so be prepared. Stop! My dad hates dishonesty. If he finds out about this, I'll be disowned. Then who will take care of me?
You're an adult.
Why not work for yourself? No way! I've been living a comfortable housewife life on Phil's salary. I don't want to work now. It's too humiliating.
Faced with Linda's selfishness, both Raymond and Phil were dumbfounded, speechless.
You'd better experience some hardship and reflect on your actions.
Can't you do something? I'm sorry. I really am remorseful. You're the only one I can turn to now. Finally, Linda begged for forgiveness through her tears. However, I simply looked at her coldly, without giving any response. Perhaps thinking she had no other options left. She started to cry out.
I'm so sorry. Please help me.
Right there and then.
You know, Owen sought your help many times too. But you ignored all his pleas. Thinking only of yourself is really convenient, isn't it?
Hearing my words, Linda broke down crying, but I was unmoved and threw her out of the house. After that, Phil and Linda's divorce was finalized, and Linda was ordered to pay $30,000 in alimony. We also claimed $10,000 from her affair partner, the former teacher. But Linda, having drained her savings, got a job at a night bar only to be fired soon after due to her selfish nature. Currently, she's juggling jobs in road construction and cleaning. Phil still has to work abroad but has promised to return home whenever possible to see Owen. Until Phil returns, we, as a couple, have taken it upon ourselves to care for Owen. Filling the gap of the time we couldn't see him, watching Owen grow has brought true happiness to Raymond and me.
Living with a sick person? That's too depressing, no way. Just leave that dying Miel alone.
Matthew threw those cold words at me when I expressed my desire to live with my mom, who was in the last stage of breast cancer.
I wonder if she couldn't eat good food because she was poor. That's so sad.
My Miel, who always disliked my mom, seemed almost pleased upon hearing about my mom's illness. I was shocked. Don't they have a heart? Years later, Miel was diagnosed with a terminal cancer as well. Matthew decided we should live with Miel without asking me, so to get back at him, I chose to leave the house. My name is Alicia, I'm 32. I married Matthew, a former colleague from work, 5 years ago. I wanted to keep working, but Matthew wanted me to focus on housekeeping, so I reluctantly became a housewife. We lived just the two of us, but Mael Samantha, who lived nearby, often came over. Samantha, who was born and raised in a wealthy family, had a different set of values, but we got along reasonably well. The only concern was the bad relationship between my mom, Natalie, and Samantha. My mom grew up in a fatherless household and was forced to live in poverty. Maybe that's why she took good care of things and didn't indulge in luxuries. However, Samantha was extravagant and bragged about being wealthy more than necessary. The pre-wedding family meeting took place in a hotel near the in-laws' house. The meal went smoothly, but when I went to the restroom, I found Samantha and Mom arguing.
Where did you buy those clothes? They look so poor. Well, I hate the idea of being related to someone who dresses so strangely. Why is Matthew marrying someone from such a weird family? It's not about appearance. Judging people by such things isn't right.
Mom wasn't fazed and countered firmly, which seemed to annoy Samantha, who glared at her fiercely. They met again at the wedding but didn't talk at all, and Mom and Samantha haven't met since. Samantha, who lived alone, a 10-minute walk away, was living off the inheritance from her husband, who was a doctor. Perhaps because she had time on her hands living alone, she often visited our house. Before Matthew went to work, he told me to keep the next Sunday free.
Why? I was planning to visit Mom on Sunday. Mom's coming over to visit. Can't you handle it alone? If you're my wife, you should at least offer Mom some coffee. But I want to visit my mom sometimes too. We can do that some other time.
It's not too far to my parents' home. Just about a 15-minute drive. But because Samantha came over almost every week, I hadn't seen my mom for nearly 3 months. We kept in touch by phone and text, but I missed seeing her in person from time to time. Since Dad passed away, Mom had been working part-time and could only really relax on Sundays. But with Samantha visiting almost every week, it had been hard to find the time to go home. I was just thinking that this week, I should visit my parents' home and talk to Mom. That's when I got a call from an unknown number on my mobile phone. It's XX Hospital. Your mom collapsed at work and was brought here. I panicked at the sudden news. I rushed out of the house and headed to the hospital, where I found my mom lying down. The doctor invited me into the examination room to talk. Your mom has breast cancer. Breast cancer? Can it be cured? Unfortunately, the cancer has spread. It's unlikely to be completely cured. How sad. I couldn't help but tear up at the doctor's words. I never imagined my mom could have cancer. I still haven't been able to repay her for everything. What am I going to do now? I was filled with anxiety. The treatment will be tough and the chances of a complete recovery are slim. We recommend palliative care to make her as comfortable as possible. The doctor's kind words helped me regain some composure, and I returned to the ward. Mom looked much thinner than the last time I saw her. I couldn't help but think that if I had visited Mom sooner, I might have noticed earlier. But it's too late for regrets. I told Mom I wanted to live with her and take care of her at home. She smiled happily at my decision. So, I decided to discuss it with Matthew as soon as I got home. By the time I finished all the hospital procedures, it was already evening. When I got home, Samantha and Matthew were there. Matthew had asked Samantha to prepare dinner because he knew I'd be home late. How's Natalie? She has breast cancer. It seems pretty bad, and the treatment doesn't look promising. I told Matthew, fighting back tears. Matthew looked as sad as if it was about his own family and comforted me by stroking my back. Grateful for Matthew's kindness, I told him I wanted to live with my mom. But his response was unexpected. That's a problem. It's depressing to come home to a bedridden sick person. Living with MIL and having to be considerate all the time? Absolutely not. But my time with Mom is running short. It's only right to spend it together. I disagree. Can you really take care of Natalie and handle all the housework? Exactly. We need the housework done properly, and you don't even know anything about caregiving. I won't neglect the housework, and I'll learn about caregiving. It's not like she's bedridden right away. Just leave dying Natalie alone. It's such a hassle. Right. It's really silly how desperate you are. They laughed. I could only stare at them in disbelief. Are these people even humans? How can they suggest leaving Mom alone when she is about to pass away? Maybe she couldn't afford nutritious food because she was poor. But at least it's not a contagious disease. Samantha said with a laugh. I glared at her, burning with anger. Then, Samantha looked at me and smirked. What's with that look? If you don't like it, just leave. Not sure if Natalie, a part-time worker with a meager salary, and you, a housewife with no income, can survive even a week, though. That's right. I'm supporting you. You should listen to me. I couldn't respond. Matthew paid for all our living expenses. My savings were only from before we got married. There was no way the two of us could live on that. So, I decided to visit my parents' home during the day and take care of Mom. It's only a 15-minute drive, not too far to commute. At first, balancing housework and caregiving was manageable, but gradually, as her illness progressed, Mom's muscles weakened and she could hardly walk. It was harder than I imagined. Still, I studied caregiving methods diligently and tried my best to repay Mom. I took care of her and did the housework without a break, getting more and more tired. Then one day, I saw unfamiliar shoes at my parents' home. When I went to Mom's bedroom, I found her sister, Hannah. What happened? Natalie asked me to come and help Alicia. I'm sorry for the trouble. I'd be okay with staying at a facility, but I thought Alicia might not want that. Indeed, I wanted her to spend as much time as possible at home. Understanding that, Mom had asked Hannah for help. I'm sorry. It's okay. I want to help too. From that day, Hannah started coming to the house every other day to help. Having Hannah's help made things much easier. I had more time to rest and felt a little more at ease, but cruelly, the disease kept ravaging Mom's body. She caught a severe cold, developed pneumonia, and was admitted to the hospital. A week after her admission, I got a call from the hospital saying Mom was critical. When I arrived at the hospital, it was just when Mom's heart stopped. As the beeping of the machines echoed, I broke down. The tears didn't stop at the farewell too soon with Mom. I was so emotionally shattered that I could hardly manage my daily life. If it weren't for Hannah, I don't think I could have handled the funeral preparations or the inheritance procedures. Matthew and Samantha didn't offer help until the end, nor did they seem to care. Honestly, I was thinking of divorcing Matthew. But my lack of financial independence was a barrier. So, I started working in caregiving. I thought about saving up quickly to get a divorce, but then something happened that made it impossible. I was pregnant. It was a long-awaited child, and both Matthew and Samantha were overjoyed. For me too, it was a much-desired child. Though it was nice to see Matthew and Samantha happy about it. Being pregnant meant I couldn't continue working. A few months later, my son Sean was born safely. Seeing newborn Sean made me feel I had to protect him no matter what. With few childcare centers accepting infants, and the demands of childcare and housework, I reluctantly resigned from my job. I lost my chance to divorce, and about 5 years passed. I started working in caregiving again when Sean began attending preschool. I worked only while Sean was at preschool, juggling housework and childcare at home. One day, Matthew came home early on his day off with a somber look. It was much earlier than his usual return time. Usually, he'd spend his days off golfing with friends or going to the movies, not returning until the evening. But today, it was only 3 p.m.
Dad, you're home early.
Sean greeted him happily, but Matthew didn't respond. We need to have a serious talk, so Sean, please go to your room. After taking Sean to his room, I sat down on the sofa.
What's wrong? You look upset.
Actually, I got a call from Mom. She has a cancer.
What?
The same breast cancer as Natalie. And there's no treatment for Mom either.
I see.
Thinking of Mom, my heart ached. The shock of her passing still hadn't healed, and my heart was still wounded. But my time to grieve was short. Mom said she wants to spend time with us. So, we're going to live together.
What?
She's planning to move in the week after next. Wait.
What's wrong?
Matthew, you're so against me living with my mom. That was years ago, and that was Alicia's mom. This time it's my mom. It's different. How is it different? I'm absolutely against it. What are you talking about? Can't you, as a wife, take care of your MIL? You married me. It's only natural to treat my mom the same as your mom. Matthew countered with an argument that made no sense. I'm sorry, but I won't be taking care of Samantha. Given how you've spent your days off playing around, never bothering with childcare or housework, you're probably just going to dump the caregiving on me, aren't you? That's not true. But Alicia, you work in caregiving, right? So it makes sense for you to do it. What are you talking about? I'm not going to take care of Samantha without getting paid. How heartless can you be? Look, living together is already decided. I'm renting an electric bed, so make space for it. With that, Matthew left the house. I was left reeling by Matthew's selfishness. I hadn't forgotten the hurtful things Samantha and Matthew said to me when I wanted to live with my mom. I didn't want to take on the burden of caregiving for such unkind people. I was determined to divorce. After that, Matthew was often late coming home, claiming he was busy with hospital visits and arrangements. He often returned after Sean and I had gone to bed. In Matthew's absence, I began preparing for divorce. The one who helped me with the divorce preparations was Hannah. Hannah had been through a divorce herself, so I consulted her about what should be done. She not only shared her own experiences but also provided useful information I hadn't even thought of. However, one of my biggest concerns was finding a new home. Even renting an apartment was difficult because I couldn't afford places with high rent. I struggled to find a place that was affordable, suitable for Sean and me, and not too far from my workplace. That's when Hannah offered help.
If you're struggling with rent, I can introduce you to a good property. A friend of mine owns an apartment, and I believe one room is vacant. She's willing to rent it cheaply to have it occupied, and it's not too far from your workplace.
Grateful for Hannah's offer, I immediately asked her to introduce me to the property. It was conveniently located, not far from Sean's preschool and my workplace, so I signed the contract right away. But there was another thing that worried me. It was about Sean. I felt it was unfair to suddenly drag him into the situation and separate him from his dad. I was considering giving up on the divorce if Sean was against it. However, Sean spoke to me with kind words.
Mom, are you okay? Are you in pain? No, I'm not in pain. Just thinking. Would you be sad if you couldn't live with Dad anymore? I'd be a little sad, but I hate seeing you sad more.
I was taken aback by Sean's words and looked into his eyes. Sean continued with a slightly sad face.
Because Mom, you look a little sad when you're with Dad. I prefer it when you smile.
I had heard that children are very observant, but I was surprised to see how much Sean noticed about me. I thought he was still just a child, but he seemed to sense that things weren't going well with Matthew. And still, Sean chose me. With Sean's understanding, I decided to take action. The day came for Samantha to move in. Matthew had left a message saying to make space for the electric bed and other items. He went to the in-laws' house to bring Samantha's belongings. Seizing the moment, I left the divorce papers at the house and took Sean with me to our new apartment. I ignored Matthew's calls as Sean and I sorted through our belongings. The thought of starting a new life filled me with a sense of liberation. Life with just the two of us turned out to be more comfortable than I expected. By cutting costs and living frugally, my salary was sufficient to support us. In fact, I had used my free time after having my child to study caregiving and had obtained a certification, which resulted in a higher salary than before. Since Matthew never contributed to household chores or childcare, the amount of housework I had to do remained the same. Actually, it was easier without having to cook and do laundry for Matthew. However, in the midst of our comfortable life, I unexpectedly ran into Matthew at the supermarket.
Alicia, what are you doing? You left the house without saying anything.
Matthew approached me, shouting amidst the crowd.
Stop it. There are so many people here. Damn it. Come home. We'll talk there.
I honestly didn't want to return to that house. To face Samantha again. I didn't want to see her face at all. But to keep my current home a secret, I had no choice but to comply. As soon as I entered the house, Samantha began berating me.
Where have you been, Alicia? It doesn't matter where. Of course it does. You should come back and take care of Mom. No thanks. Why not just leave dying people alone? What did you say? How could you say such a thing? Did you forget already? Isn't that what you told me? Why should I do anything for Samantha when you never lifted a finger?
Matthew and Samantha's faces turned red with anger and breathed heavily.
I don't mind if Matthew wants to care for Samantha. I just want a divorce. Why divorce all of a sudden? You don't even have to do caregiving, just handle the household chores. Are you tired of even that?
No.
It's not the chores I'm tired of. I'm tired of being Matthew's wife. I can't be with someone who cheats on me with a younger woman, saying he's busy with preparations while his mom is sick.
What do you mean?
What are you talking about?
Samantha looked puzzled, and Matthew stuttered in denial. His panic made it seem like an admission, but he still tried to lie his way out.
Actually, when I talked to Hannah about divorcing Matthew because of his tyrannical attitude, she said she saw Matthew entering a young woman's house.
So I did a little investigation and sure enough, he's been meeting a woman almost every day. A coworker, maybe? I have the photos. I had received photos of Matthew's infidelity from the investigation. When I showed them, Matthew's face turned pale. Samantha glared at Matthew.
Matthew, what are you doing when I'm going through such a hard time? No, it's not like that. I was thinking this would be the last time we meet. Making memories before I start caring for Mom. I won't meet her again.
Even if you don't meet her anymore, the fact that you cheated won't change. If you refuse to divorce, I'm not afraid to go to the court, but you won't stand a chance of winning. So, please sign the divorce papers quickly. And from now on, any discussions about the divorce should go through my lawyer. Matthew looked frustrated and then, as if he had an idea, he smirked maliciously. You're working in caregiving now, right? Yes. I bet you're not earning much. With your salary, you must be living a poor life in a cheap apartment. Citing my lack of financial resources. But I was no longer the person I used to be. Thankfully, I got a good deal on a cheap apartment and am living a slightly better life. Of course, I need to be frugal, but I'm not struggling so much that Sean has to go without. I won't be controlled by you forever. Controlled? Yes. You wanted to keep me from earning money by dumping all the housework on me, making me think I couldn't live without you. But I can live without you. When I spoke my mind, Matthew's face twisted in frustration.
Fine, I'll divorce you. But don't come crying when you run out of money. Life will only get tougher when Sean starts advancing in school. Just wait, you'll suffer.
Matthew signed the divorce papers on the spot. I took them and stood up. Thank you. Now we're strangers. Good luck with Samantha's care. Oh, and about the compensation from the divorce trial, my lawyer will handle it. With those words, I left the house. It was half a year later. Not at the supermarket where I had previously met Matthew, but at a different one, I saw Matthew standing at the entrance. And when he saw me, he hurriedly approached.
I'm glad to find you. If you live around here, I thought you'd come here for sure.
What do you want? We're strangers now, so don't talk to me.
Wait. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Please come back.
It seemed Matthew didn't know my apartment or workplace and had been waiting for me at local supermarkets, hoping to run into me. And then, Matthew fervently apologized. What now?
I was wrong. Mom can't even go to the toilet by herself anymore, and I can't manage caregiving after work. It's too much. I'm exhausted, making mistakes at work. I can't handle it all on my own.
Matthew was likely struggling with housekeeping. He was wearing a dirty shirt. And his hair was unkempt and unbearable to look at. So you realized how hard caregiving is.
I really felt it. So, can you come back and help?
No.
But why?
It's too late for regrets now. It's all because of what you did, Matthew. Don't come near me again. If you follow me, I'll report it to the police.
Alicia, don't say that. Please.
Make sure you pay the child support and compensation from the divorce trial. Matthew was in tears. The same Matthew who always looked down on me. His pathetic state was just astonishing. The heartless words about my mom, the selfish behavior of constantly playing around without caring for the family, and to top it off, the betrayal of cheating, this was the result. There was no other way to put it but as a consequence of his own actions. Afterward, Matthew apparently pressured his affair partner into marriage, but was, of course, rejected. It seemed she reported him to their superiors, leading to a sexual harassment case, and he was transferred. Came from former colleagues at the company where we both worked before getting married. Having several acquaintances there, I naturally received updates. Balancing caregiving and work became too much for him, his performance dropped, and with the transfer, his salary significantly decreased. With the reduced income and obligations to pay the child support and compensation from the divorce, he's apparently in a situation where he can't afford a helper or caregiving services. He's desperately trying to provide care, but he's at his limit both mentally and physically, unable to focus at work, making frequent mistakes, and spiraling down. A former colleague mentioned that if the mistakes continue, he might even be fired. It's unfortunate, but it's no longer my concern. I'm living a peaceful life in the apartment Hannah introduced to me. Balancing housework and my job is challenging, but with Sean and Hannah's support, we're managing. It's a pity I couldn't show Sean to Mom, but I like to think she's watching over us as I do my best for Sean's sake.